So everyone got their alcohol ready?
Yep. Got the IV set up with the booze.
Fantastic.
I was surprised by this movie in many ways.
I gotta say, I was regretting my decision.
I think this would be something I'd show to my kids.
Oh, that's good to hear.
I think it's about a father's love for his child.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
And a complete stranger's love for that man's
They
child.
wore really ugly outfits. Puke yellow, prom night, pale blue, you know.
I don't even know where to start with this
Definitely
film.
not a movie I would consider watching unless you told me to. Hello, I'm Derek,
And I'm Peter.
and this is The Mog.
And this mog is a gog because today we have the amazing opportunity to speak with Gareth Reynolds, aka not Gary, aka Gaffy, who features as one half of the popular bi-singular weekly American history comedy podcast, The Dollop. Thanks for joining us, Eddie baby.
Hey, thanks for that intro. Very, very nice and mildly confusing, but very nice.
Yeah, that's pretty much how we roll.
That's what happens when you do a bi-weekly show once a week.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that adding extra confusion, it's easier to run with things as they come at you.
Yeah.
So, Derek, did you want to give Gareth a bit of a rundown of what we are all about?
Yeah, so we're massively inspired by The Dollop. And we all have these beloved films from our childhood. Some are quite obscure. So our podcast premise, we force the other to watch our favorite childhood film, and the other hasn't seen it before. And so how do these films hold up without the nostalgia tinted glasses?
Yeah.
Oh boy. Not well normally.
No. Though, when we first started doing it, one of the ones that I tortured Derek with was called The Toy.
Oh yeah.
And
Yeah.
we had arguments after watching that because that really scarred Derek having to watch it again.
Richard Pryor. It was a great comedy, but it was extremely racist. And I'm dark-skinned.
Well, most like it really is always. I mean, it's shocking now, like in not as long of time spans, but yeah, you watch and the racism that was in most movies, like from the 70s or 80s, it's just sometimes shocking.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And we just watched one called Forbidden Planet again. And that's 30 white dudes, one white woman in the film. It was a science fiction film. And I hadn't watched it for ages. And my God, it was sexist.
Yeah.
So,
Well, yeah. I mean, anytime you do the real life Smurfs situation, it's going to be, there's definitely, I mean, those numbers are just stacked against any
Papa Smurf.
woman feeling comfortable. Yeah, exactly. The kid from The Toy, one of the kids from The Toy ended up doing porn. Do you know that?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I can't remember his
the
name.
little guy, the one that said,
Yeah, this little cutie pie, and then he becomes like 30, and he's like, "You like that?"
yeah. Well, he was a good actor too, so I'd imagine he probably did well for himself.
Well, you've still used toys in both careers. Which I think is valuable.
Amazing.
and potentially with older black men as well, I guess.
Oh, sure, yeah, sky's the limit. Yeah, Bill Cosby's The Toy.
Oh, a true crime documentary.
Yeah. A porno that nobody asked for.
So, I was just wondering, are there any movies that, when you were a child, sort of influenced you?
Oh yeah, I mean, I really watched a lot of. I watched a lot of film and television growing up. I mean. And as a young kid, I mean, I watched, as like a really young kid, I would watch, like The Three Amigos was a movie. I remember one time my babysitter telling me that I couldn't watch anymore because I'd like burned it so many times. She was just like going mental from me being like, we can watch The Three Amigos. And she's like, no, we're not watching The Three Amigos again. Little shit.
It's gone.
And then I watched Pee-wee's Big Adventure, which was a movie that I really just like.
Oh my God!
Like I couldn't. It had like eerie elements to it, and I remember as a kid it making me feel a little weird at times. But I still was like, that movie just kind of spiked more emotion in me than anything I'd ever seen, and that's a movie that really still does hold up. I mean, it's just like it's the right amount of bizarre and.
Oh really?
Yeah. And then my dad got me into the Marx Brothers, and I started watching old comedies. Yeah, I started to watch a lot of like in middle school, and I started watching like a lot of Chaplin and I really started watching a lot of Buster Keaton movies. But then when I found the Marx Brothers, you know, it was one of those things too, where like, you know, there's just some things as a kid you're like, I just don't like how it looks. I don't want to watch it. And that's how I was with the Marx Brothers. And then the first time I watched, I think it was Duck Soup, I was just like, holy shit, what is this?
Oh, right.
Yeah. And then then I watched all of them and became a big fan.
Yeah,
But,
A Night at the Opera and Day at the Races were my favorites.
oh yeah. Well, Horse Feathers too is another.
Yeah.
Just, I mean, you know, the Harpo Marx was like, I mean, there's just something, I don't know, there's something unnatural about how funny that guy was.
Yeah,
speaking.
yeah. And I can do a good impression of him when I'm not whistling.
Right. Oh, that's good. I always like to do the leg thing he would do.
Oh, yeah.
Where someone would just be standing there and he somehow would put his leg into their hand and they'd be holding his leg as it sort of swayed back and forth.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, he grabs it. Yeah, that's right.
I loved that. I still use that move from time to time. Group pictures.
When you're in a bar, walking up.
Yeah, you know, just oh man, only if I pine for the day when I can just act like Harpo in a bar.
Well, I actually haven't seen the Marx Brothers, so this is a perfect sort of example of the Mog. So I rewatched some of the best scenes, and I noticed that leg thing. It's amazing.
Yeah,
and also the password sketch.
Oh, swordfish.
The swordfish. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Harper's inserts a sword into a fish.
Yeah. I mean, there are just some bits that are like truly just, I mean, you say ahead of their time, but like, I think what that means is that it's still funny today. I mean, there are gags in there that are still used today, like in films, or just ripped from Marx Brothers movies.
Well, their skill, they were so multi-talented as well. I remember and
Zeppo. The main ones were talented, and then there was Zeppo.
Everyone.
Sorry, I couldn't go.
Yeah, he was multi-talented. Well, I can't even remember what he looks like, but
he looked like he was just like a wet noodle. They would just be like, "Oh, Zeppo." He'd be like, "I don't think we should go anywhere," and they'd be like, "Zeppo, that's not going to be fun. We should just attend university." No, Zeppo. No, Zepp.
That's right. I feel like getting a job. What do you want to be?
Yeah. No, I think we should just plan for our future accordingly. No, Zeppo, we're going to make $1 million.
Have you picked up the milk yet?
Yeah, Zeppo, we should all turn in, get a good night's sleep.
I remember A Day at the Races, the piano bit where he starts playing the piano and it starts falling apart, and then he turns it into a harp.
Yeah,
that's just amazing. That skit.
Him and Harpo and Salvador Dali were very good friends, and Salvador Dali one time sent Harpo a harp with barbed wire where the actual strings should be, and Harpo just sent him back a picture of his hands and fingers bandaged up with a sort of pained look on his face.
Nice. Yeah. I heard a story that because he was silent all the time, he did this speech later in life, and apparently everyone was used to him not saying anything, and then he just started to talk, and then he just did not stop talking.
That's amazing.
And everyone was in hysterics because he just, they hadn't heard him before, and he just kept going and
That's
going
amazing.
and going.
Yeah, he was bottled up.
All those years.
Yeah, all those years. He was like, "Oh, fuck, I hate harps."
I wanted to learn the guitar so bad.
Oh, that felt good. Felt good.
Well, we did a bit of Derek's got a bit of a journalistic background to him, so he did a bit of digging and he looked into some of the stuff that you'd mentioned in the past about what was it, Monty Python as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I would watch older shit. I mean, I definitely would watch the garbage of my time as well, but I always liked older stuff. And I mean, I remember when I was a kid, because my family's English, so I remember as a kid, I think the first Monty Python sketch I really remember was one called Lupin Man.
Oh,
where
yeah,
it was
yeah.
John Cleese was coming back to like a sort of a starved village.
It was Dennis Moore.
Yeah, and he would just come back with lupins, a flower, and they called him Lupin Man, and they played a whole song called Lupin Man, and he'd come back, and they'd be like, "What have you brought?" And he'd be like, "I've got lupins," and they'd be like, "Oh fuck, more lupins! We don't need more lupins. We need food." He'd be like, "Well, I've got a big bag of lupins."
We've got lupin stew and
yeah, right, yeah. And then the movies. I mean, the Monty Python movies are. I think every single one of them is independently just pretty brilliant.
Well, this is another thing that I've got a big background in that Derek doesn't. So he's only been into really twisted films that would scar a normal person for life. But
Like
but
Deliverance.
like
Oh
Deliverance.
shit! How old were you when you saw Deliverance?
4.
Oh my god! Oh my god!
Changed my view of
It's just like
manhood.
Derek won't go near the river for some reason. Derek hates rivers. Oh my god! Who allowed this? Was your family around?
They were the ones
Yeah,
that
they
watched
were.
it.
Did they not know what was coming?
Oh my gosh. I thought they were just hugging.
Yeah, you see, when a man and another man like each other on a road trip, they share a special hug.
But Pete actually forced me to watch Holy Grail with him, and I've just been bombarded with people imitating the skits. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
my Monty Python is sort of very scarred.
Yeah.
And I've
No, that
done
happens.
nothing but imitate scripts, so I was one of those culprits.
Yeah. No, I get that. Well, I think The Meaning of Life is is maybe their best movie. It's definitely quoted, but I think it's a little under the radar.
Yeah, it's a different structured film. It's more like it's a series of sketch strewn by a loose narrative.
Yeah.
And just a little mint.
Just wafer thin. Yeah, I mean, it really is. Like, it's one of those things too that, like, I think probably what Derek experienced, but where, like, I remember it being quoted and then finally seeing it and being like almost relieved that I knew what it was. Like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
that's something.
It's like right now, what we were just talking about. I bet Derek has no idea
It's just classic
what
Derek.
we were just talking
But
about.
I did watch some of the other stuff from the TV show, like the Lumberjack
Oh,
and
yeah.
the ex-parrot.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
there's
That's
one of
great.
I have a lot of audio Monty Python on my iPod, and like the one that I'll never not listen to is this guy who wants an argument.
Oh
It's
yeah,
just-
yeah.
He's like, I'm here to have an argument. He's like,
Yeah,
all right, that'll be all right. Now, what would you like? Well, I want an argument. No, you don't. Yes, I do. No, you don't. Yes, I do. No, you don't. I absolutely do.
I'm sorry. Is this a 5-minute argument?
Yeah, yes, just the 5 minutes, right? Well, no, you don't. It's like, this is an argument. This is just contradiction. No, it isn't. Yes, it is. No, it isn't. I could do it all day.
I know, and I'm trying my hardest not to jump in and do it badly.
And listen, like I'm doing it justice.
Yeah, you will.
The thing I noticed also was they kept the references throughout, like Bolton, the palindrome thing.
Yeah.
It's not love, and I'll introduce that later on. That was pretty great.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
well, the truth is that, like, with anything like that, it's baby steps as far as comedy goes. So it's like but nobody had just gone on air with a show that was that weird.
Yeah.
Like, everybody else
crazy.
had been aiming to please audiences, whereas they were a little more okay with puzzling people and just being totally silly, which just...
Yeah, like at the end of the lumberjack scene, there's John Cleese being spit roasted by 3 middle-aged
Yeah.
women. Going, ooh,
Yeah, yeah,
so random.
yeah. No, and they had those little Terry Gilliam drawings in between, and they were just
Oh, yeah,
absolutely surrealist, They were just like... I don't think you could get that show on the air today.
Yeah, if it wasn't considered a classic,
Yeah.
it was just a great point in time for it to be inserted.
Yeah, and it was back when networks would just sort of be like, let's try something,
Yeah. Oh, and there were so many during that period of time. There were so many comedians who were just coming on with shows. I think what was it, Stephen Fry and Hugh Laurie? They,
Oh, yeah.
they were
A
one
little bit of
those
Fry
as
and
well.
Laurie.
Yeah.
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 No, and Moore and Cook, and there were a lot of but they were all like, they were trying to be, I don't know, Monty Python just probably hit my brain at like either the wrong or right time, depending on how you look at it. But it was just like this dose of absolute, just giddy, baffling humor.
It was, completely different from everything else, and just tone and feel, and it was just ludicrous. I think it just hit every age.
So when you go back and you watch the movies, like, do you also do the thing where there are jokes that you've always thought were funny as a kid but never knew why, and now you're like, oh, I get it. It's a sex joke. I know what foreskin is now. This is funny. Now I get it because I understand what foreskin is.
Yeah. There's a bit of that. There's also a lot of unintentional suggestive stuff in old films. There was one that have you ever seen The Last Starfighter?
I don't think so. No.
It's a science fiction film, and there's a bit where this guy has been invited to get into just a stranger's car to be taken to a wondrous place. And it's just
sounds like the prequel to Deliverance.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty much.
Getting in strange cars with men.
Yeah.
Getting in strange cars.
Yeah.
And what was it? And there was the toy, obviously, and Deliverance.
I wonder if Ned Beatty knew when he was filming that would be his most remembered moment.
His most remembered line, people yelling at him.
Oh, yeah.
Squeal.
Oh, just try to eat a fucking dinner with your family and someone's coming over like, you having bacon? Does it squeal for you? Oh, yeah, fuck off. It's my 11-year-old's birthday.
Amazing.
Did you get him a bow and arrow?
Yeah. Oh, there we go. You know, your dad likes to go to the... Sir, get out of here.
Oh man, no, it is crazy when you go back and you watch these things. And you know, what was that French one?
City of Lost Children.
City of Lost Children. Man, that was bizarre. Yeah. Crazy films. So was it mainly comedies that were influential for you? Were there any like really strange things that you'd never, like, you'd see once and you just couldn't forget?
You know, I really did watch mostly comedy. I'm trying to think if there was anything, you know, this is probably not exactly what you're talking about, but I remember, you know, when my family first got cable, this is like my dad's favorite story, is I was probably like 5 or 6. And, you know, I had my own little chair, like when you're a kid and you just, for whatever reason, you're just like, I need a chair. And you just get like a chair that's appropriate size for you. So I was just in this, you know, I just love my little chair. And so my mother walked into a room and there was like a sex scene on TV and my dad was reading and my brother was playing music. And so my mother was just like, asked my dad if he was watching it and he said no. And she asked my brother and he said no. And she went to turn it off. And I, from my little chair where no one knew I was under a table, just go, I'm watching it. But yeah, I don't know. I don't really know. I mean, I actually, you know, a movie, this is so fucking embarrassing. You know what movie I really loved? I mean, just loved was Pretty Woman.
Oh,
right.
nice.
Yeah.
I loved Pretty Woman. I would watch Pretty Woman all the time. I thought that was such a great movie.
But I can understand that. When you're a kid, and I'd imagine that one would have been lost on you, all of the prostitution and all of
I was a
that
little
type of
older.
stuff.
I mean, I still definitely totally did not, you know, like the beginning like is all about how one of them is going to leave prostitution and, you know, like, I mean, I'm sure that I wasn't grasping the, you know, intertwining of pimps and sex workers at that time. You know, I was like, what do they do? Make milkshakes? What are they talking about? But yeah, that was I don't know. I loved that movie. I was like in love with Julia Roberts as a kid.
Well, that's it. And I think in a way you shouldn't feel embarrassed at films that you enjoyed as a kid because some of them are twisted and obscure and you watch them again and maybe they don't have the same tint, but they did have positive memories. And I think that's what's...
No, I was genuinely, I mean... When I think about it, like that, you know, there should be little doubt that I would get into some form of like, you know, entertainment or writing or comedy because, you know, it was all I watched. I mean, I really did. All I would watch was old, you know, I'd watch Taxi, I'd watch Welcome Back, Kotter, I'd watch old Cheers. You know, like I would just Mork and Mindy, Happy Days. I would just watch these shows that were, you know, whatever, maybe, you know, 10 to 20 years ahead of when I was actually even born. And yeah, I mean, I just was always obsessed with the characters and the timing. And there's this one Taxi joke I'll always remember where Christopher Lloyd's character is trying to get his driver's license. And Jeff Conway goes to the DMV with him. And Christopher Lloyd goes, hey, what does a yellow light mean? And he goes, slow down. Christopher Lloyd goes, what does a yellow light mean? And he goes, slow down. And then he goes, what does a yellow light? I mean, they do it like 8 times. And I was just like, oh, fuck, stop. This is too good. You know, like that stuff. I think even then, you know, like when you first start even doing comedy or, you know, trying to be funny, even with your friends, you're not funny. You're doing someone else's jokes or you're like, you know, doing a bastardized version of something you've seen. You're really just kind of responding and imitating. But in the long run, those are the things that sort of are just the genesis for like how you are funny, how you make jokes, and
Absolutely.
your timing. I relate back to my it sounds crazy, but yeah, I mean, I think of comedy in my childhood all the time.
Yeah. Because, you're right. I mean, it's essentially training, thinking about all the comedic timing. And I think it takes the right mind to have that level of observation about the intonation of words or the cadence and the timing of when to push forward and when to give it time.
When to say yellow light, slow down for the 8th time.
Yeah. Well, well, I do have a yes or no question.
Okay.
So, do you ever find it challenging to be comedic at the same time as being sensitive to the morality of a situation while being shocked by the disturbing ways that people treat each other?
Absolutely.
Cool.
Yeah. Am I only allowed to say yes or no?
Look, you can say more if you'd like.
I mean, whatever you want. Yes is the answer.
Say more.
Yeah, I think, especially if, in the world we are sort of in now, I think, I don't know, I guess it's sort of like as you get older in your life and then as society sort of gets older as well, there are a lot of things that you do need to be sensitive towards. That now, there are a lot of people who, definitely think that you should be allowed to say anything that you want to say. And if someone gets offended, that's on them. And I don't look, I mean, like we're saying, you watch old comedies or you watch old stand-up. I mean, go watch Sam Kinison. Like Sam Kinison is he wouldn't be able to do his act today. And that's a guy who definitely is funny, but is definitely, there's just the very sexist tone to his stuff. That was, and Andrew Dice Clay. These are people who made their rap was sort of just being so male that it was misogynistic and people found it funny. But I think you absolutely have to be sensitive. I mean, anytime that on the Dollop or even in stand-up, when you're talking about race or you're talking about sexism or any of those things, you want to be funny. And, the truth is that you want to be able to say whatever you can. But there are times on the Dollop, if we're talking about slavery or something like that, I'm I just might not be the guy to make the joke about this shit,
Yeah.
Because it's not, while I think I could think of funny things to say about it, I also understand that it's not an experience that I relate to enough to, that maybe the funny part of it doesn't outweigh the sort of sensitivity you have to show towards something at times.
Yeah, it does strike me as quite difficult to understand making a joke about something that you don't know a lot about.
Yeah.
You don't know whether it's going to be too much or whether people aren't going to realize that it's a joke and you are trying to be sensitive at the same time.
Yeah. Well, look, there's going to be a bunch of people who are like you, who are going to be, I don't relate enough to this to sort of say that was fucked up. But to me, it's if one person is offended, if 10 people are offended by something that I said or that someone else said, I think you have to be sensitive to that. You have to sort of say and again, it might be me. I definitely don't think every comedian thinks like this, but yeah, I don't know. I think you can always if you leave a joke on the field, but it's for the sake of not making someone feel bad, I don't know. I'd kind of rather not make the joke.
And I feel like, having listened to the Dollop, because it really did get me interested in the path of podcasts. And I had noticed that both yourself and Dave Anthony were very conscious of that. You'd make all of these jokes, but still at the same time, you were trying to be conscious of the fact that these are people's lives in the past and that this has had really significant implications for the future as well.
Yeah. Well, we did an episode on he was basically a farmer, and he was on his property. He was young. He was, I don't think it was his farm, but he was there with either his girlfriend or at his mother's house, and his arms get ripped off by some kind of crazy farm equipment. And he goes in and he puts his arms on ice, and he's making jokes throughout the whole experience. Dave is reading these seriously funny jokes this guy is making about having his arms in a bathtub on ice. And so we made a lot of jokes about it too, but because it felt like he'd sort of set the tone for that. And that was one of those situations where he emailed us And he was just like, man, I was laughing so fucking hard about when you said, you know, when you were like, pick up my arm, I want to put it around you or something. He's like, I totally would have said that shit. And, you know, that's an example of where like, oh, fuck, great, you know. But then I've also had someone reach out to me, you know, for an episode where they were related to someone we were talking about. And the person was very hurt, you know, and was like,
I'm sorry.
And yeah, well, I mean, you know, but I think there's a good lesson in there, because normally the solution to that is just communicate. Like, I communicated with both of those people, and the person who was upset wasn't upset by the end, because, you know, I was like, you know, you got to understand a couple of things. One is that if you had told me I'd ever be talking to a relative of someone that we talked about, I'd say you're crazy. Like, that just shows you the reach of it. And the other thing is that, you know, like like genuinely, I think you can kind of fall back on, like, they weren't made at the expense of this person. They're made at the lunacy of the situation. Yeah. And I think that's why we kind of try to gravitate towards doing that over just, you know, again, making I don't want to say obvious joke, because I'm sure I make a shitload of obvious ones, but, you know, why you just have a little bit of thought in the moment towards what the meaning of the words you're saying are. Because again, you're on the fly.
Absolutely.
You know, like, I don't know any of this shit. I don't know what I'm going to hear. I don't know what we're going to talk about. And there are just times, I think, where the voice in my head will just say, oh yeah, you could go for this. And there's other times it's like, man, maybe it's a listening moment, pal.
Yeah. And that's it, isn't it? It's really hard to know the difference between when to say something, when not to, what to say. And yeah, it really is just an admirable profession that you do, where you can try to be conscientious and funny at the same time. It's a real skill. It's not just something everyone can sit back and say, that's funny, I could do that. And it's just crazy, because the amount of effort that goes into getting to the point where you can actually do that on the fly.
Well, sometimes it feels like you're tiptoeing through a minefield. But yeah, you know, I think it's important stuff to talk about regardless. You know, it always is. It's doing the Dollop has really changed my perspective on so many different things, you know, classism, racism, you know, it really has. I mean, things that I thought I was very sensitive to before, but I think they make it pretty easy for you in America to ignore your history. And so I don't think it takes a lot of work to sort of just not really acknowledge it. And I think when you do sort of absorb the past as much as you can, it makes you go, I think we got some talking to do still, you know, like, I don't think we've ironed this out. Like, it's a very strange position, because when you think about racism, like, nobody in my direct family has ever owned a slave or been a slave owner, you know, but just like nobody who is Black in America now is a slave. However, you have to look at that and go, I still need to show some empathy towards the history that people that I'm a descendant of lived in.
Well, it passes down, doesn't it?
Yeah, and the ignorance passes down too. The lack of wanting to understand it. It becomes easier and easier to just forget about it. But it is something that this country and many countries need to actually just go, okay, let's be honest. What the fuck happened back there? Let's all sit down and have a powwow. You know, because there just is I just don't think it's getting us very far by pretending like shit never happened. So there's got to be a better way to do it.
When you said no one from your family has ever owned a slave, just that statement alone, there are people who now would be all for equality, but their background, they may have had, you know, great-great-grandparents that own slaves. And it's just such a hard thing to fathom.
When I went to Germany once, and I stayed with a friend of a friend, and they had pictures of their grandfather on the wall in Nazi regalia, you know?
Yeah, wow.
And it startled the fuck out of me, because I was like, what the fuck? You know, but then I was also like, I mean, I guess it's your grandpa, but seriously, what the fuck? Like, you know, like, part of me goes, okay, I understand respecting your family, but it's also like, you know, I think we need to be done promoting that time for like positivity, you know? And if you look at America now, I mean, shit, look at you know, these are not wounds that healed. These were scabs that reopened. So we thought we were way ahead of the game, only to, you know, take many steps back as far as how we treat other races and, you know, how we treat classes too. I mean, race and class are so intertwined.
Yeah, well, Australia, we have a terrible history of how we treated the natives. It's just terrible. It's awful. And yeah, it's just a convoluted, horrible mess that still hasn't been repaired.
Well, we're lucky because we wronged the Native Americans and then we wronged the African Americans. So we were able to have two nice stretches of just brutality.
Yeah, but did they go extinct? Because we made some of them go extinct. We did pretty good there.
Well, we probably did. I'm sure we made some. Surely there are some sects of Native American. I mean, we marginalized significantly.
All right, fine.
Yeah, thank you. All right.
Sorry, I'll concede.
Yeah, look, you're cute, but come on, pal.
Well, I'm trying. Yeah. So, but did you actually ever see yourself traveling around with Dave Anthony doing gigs around the world?
No, absolutely not.
I mean, that's just that's awesome.
No, I mean that's what is strange about having a career. A career where you're very much your own business in a sense. You really are like. You're trying to break yourself. You're trying to like prove your worth. And having lived in LA for a long time, over a decade trying to do this shit, of course it comes from the thing where I'm recording a show in a garage with a guy I barely know.
Yeah.
Like that's really where it started. And like, if you had told me then that this would turn into one of the tent poles of what I do for a living and, really the thing that's given me the platform to sort of speak my mind and say my thoughts and make jokes. Yeah, I would have just never seen it coming. I mean, it just was so random how it all sort of came together. But I'm very glad, I mean, I'm grateful for it all the time, truly. Like, it's just, I'm very lucky.
Well, the good news is that you can always sort of later on in life make up a story as to how it all came together.
Yeah, no, we'll make it seem like we were like very shrewd.
Yeah, it was all planned out, and you were...
Well, Dave was more aware. Dave would be like, when Dave said we're going to go to Australia, I was sort of, the first time I was like maybe, and then when we were there and he's like we're going to do theaters here eventually, I was like okay, this guy's out of his fucking tits. He's like, what is he talking about? I was like, okay, man, whatever you think.
Yeah, it's good to have that drive and that full planning.
Oh yeah. He definitely is. He's a smart motherfucker, that guy. I think that comes across.
Well, I rely on Derek for relatability.
Good.
Because he's just a nicer guy than I am, so I just rely on that.
That's important.
Yeah, it is. I'm just an asshole all around, really.
I was gonna say it, but I didn't want to.
Oh yeah, sorry. I just wanted to make you feel comfortable enough to say it.
That's very nice.
But it's just amazing how it's changed for yourself, and I know that you have introduced other podcasts that have kicked off. What are the murder? My Favorite Murder. I remember you talking about them, and that's how I started listening to them as well.
Yeah, I think it's helpful because like you're able to, podcast. Even when we talk to like agents and shit about the Dollop, it's like they still aren't sure what the fuck this is. They're like podcasting and booking live podcasts. They're still sort of figuring out what this is. They're very happy, just like theaters are or comedy clubs, because there's now sort of a new thing to do. But what's great about it is people get exposed to something through word of mouth so much more than other shit. Like, I don't think you hear about stand-ups like you hear about podcasts. Someone is just like, podcasting is a very strange thing that's just really started to just kind of explode. And so there's, if there's someone good or if there's a good podcast, you want people to hear it.
Oh, absolutely.
Like you want people to know about it,
And it's a shared thing as well. So it's not like you feel like you're competing with people when, everyone's just sitting at work listening to podcasts all the time, or just it's everywhere. It's like
there's enough to. I mean, look, if people like podcasts, they want to listen to good podcasts as much as they can. So it's not like people are like, I only listen to 2. It's like if someone likes something, they'll listen to it, and there's a lot of crossover fans between certain shows, and it's great. It really is. I mean, like you support, like My Favorite Murder is just obviously blown that fuck up, and it's just like you want to see that. That is good. That's good for everybody involved in it, because it's like this gets the word out more. This is legitimizing this more. Like the more that people are succeeding with it, the better it is for anyone else doing it.
Yeah. Well, I'm pretty sure I'm responsible for about 2 people listening to your podcast, so I'm pretty proud of myself.
Are they named Derek and Peter?
That's me.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, maybe.
Oh, Jesus, this really
I tried.
This petered out. Sorry.
I'm going to steal one of Pete's questions just for a final one. For anyone starting a podcast, would you have any advice?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not, it's very hard. I mean, like, like I said, with me and Dave, we were just in a garage. But yeah, I mean, my advice would be have something to say. I think that is with all really good comedy, with all, or all engaging things, there's something that someone needs to say or someone needs to hear. And that's what brings people towards this stuff is that, if someone is saying something that they feel like it matters, I think listeners key into that too. That's why the bond between people who do podcasts and people who listen to podcasts is sort of different than most other avenues of comedy or entertainment, because there is this level of like, you're hearing someone say something, for an hour a week, for 2 hours a week, that they would never say if it wasn't for a podcast. That's not it's not really rehearsed. It's not anything that's predetermined. It's someone talking, and like just talking for an hour. I mean, think of Will Anderson's show. Like, I mean, that, think of the amount of bits and comedy that have come out of him having a podcast just because he doesn't stop talking, because he just has so many funny takes and he just is so quick that it's like, this is like, you get an extra hour of this dude's mind a week. I think that and it's personal, it's talking about your life or your walks or your family or whatever it is. Ours is a little different, but it's still, you're hearing the voice, you're hearing someone's take in a really kind of rare format. And I think that people connect to that, So that's what it would be. Have a message and get mugs. We have a lot of mugs. People love the Jose mugs.
All right,
Merch
Derek,
mugs
you on that?
Someone's got to be making mugs.
Amazing.
Well, look, we really do appreciate you coming on and spending some time.
Of course.
Time on our humble podcast.
No, well, I apologize if I took a while to get on your humble podcast today. So,
well, hey, I'm sure might get a few more listeners.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's good. For at least one episode anyway. Listen, look, we're all doing the same thing. You don't think that I look at the Patton episodes of the Dollop and go, I get it. I get why those numbers are big. Patton Oswalt. But no, I really appreciate it, and thank you for having me on.
Thanks so much
Thank you very
again.
much.
All right, guys.
All right. Thanks.
I love you. Miss you. Okay. Miss us.
You too.
Okay.
I'll be listening to you.
Okay. All right. Talk to you later.
All right. If you'd like to listen to more of our podcasts, our website is www.themog.com.au.
You can find us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Stitcher by searching The Mog. And if you'd like to leave us a message, we'd love to hear from you. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.
Please bear in mind when preparing your comments that our earlier podcasts are not only shit, but may offend some listeners.
Thanks so much.